today is where we talk about part 3 of Carrie, the final part. It's very small, and I really don't even think that it had to be included. I would have been okay if the book had ended after part 2, but part 3, the wreckage. So it starts off, we see Carrie's death certificate, and Sue Snell is listed as the person identifying the deceased. No other next of kin for Carrie. Cause of death is listed as hemorrhage, shock, coronary occlusion, and or coronary thrombosis possible. So it talks about the town and how it has been utterly destroyed. It's been completely gutted, and people aren't even trying to rebuild. They are just defeated. I think it said that they swept up the wreckage that was in the streets, and that was pretty much it. There wasn't a sense of hope and let's rebuild this and make it better than it was, or anything like that. It's been declared a national disaster, and people are just wanting to get out, basically. So one of the earlier death tolls was 409 people, with 49 missing, and then I believe that figure went up a little bit. So lots of people are moving away. They're pretty much shell-shocked, and we have, quote, "The overall impression is one of a town that is waiting to die." That's on page 241. So we hear that the principal and Miss Desjardins have both resigned. The White Commission, which has peppered in little excerpts throughout the book, has determined that basically this was a one-off experience and, case closed. They said, quote, "We find no reason to believe that a recurrence is likely or even possible." And that was on page 244. Sue had written a book, Sue Snell, and it's called My Name is Sue Snell. "I want to think things over, decide what I'm going to do between now and the time when my light is carried down that long tunnel into blackness." And I really like that, because that's what she had seen when Carrie died. It was just like this light that was just going down a long tunnel, and then there was nothing. And so that's how she sees death. That's how she thinks death will be for her. I just really like that connection. Then at the very, very end, the last thing, we have an excerpt from a letter, and it's a mother describing to a relative how her 2-year-old little girl is moving marbles up and down without touching them, and it reminded her of her grandma. So that's the whole thing with Carrie, is that the telekinesis was something that her grandma had. It skips a generation, because there's a whole thing about it being a recessive gene, so it's something that men don't have, women do have. Men can be carriers, but it usually skips a generation, and the likelihood of someone having a baby with a person and they both have the gene is highly unlikely. But here we are, it's happening again. So I don't think that, I like the whole, it happens more often than we think kind of thing, and it makes you wonder about, oh, what is this kid going to do? But I don't know. To me, that always felt a little odd at the end. So that is Carrie. That is the end. And I thought that I would also just include a few miscellaneous things that I noticed while I was reading. I noticed a couple of continuity errors. On page 9, this is after the girls have thrown pads and tampons at Carrie, and Carrie is described with a tampon stuck in the middle of her pubic hair. But then on page 61, Miss Desjardins is recounting things, and she very clearly recalls a wet napkin plastered squarely in the middle of her pubic hair. So I thought that was kind of a silly little discrepancy. On page 89, Stephen King references the Boston Red Sox, which I am interested in seeing if he mentions the Red Sox in most of his work, just curious. I know that he's a huge fan. On page 13, we find out that Carrie was born on the 21st of September, 1963, and Ralph died in February of 1963. So he died when Margaret was pregnant. Margaret White was pregnant with Carrie. Margaret delivered Carrie at her house. She didn't have anyone helping her. It was just her. So early on, that's what we've been told. And then later, when Carrie comes home and her mom is going over basically the sordid history of how Carrie came to be and how Margaret was going to kill her several times, Margaret says, "And then he was dead, and then I thought God had visited me with cancer." So she's referencing the fact that Ralph died and she thought her pregnancy was a cancer that was going to kill her. But then, earlier on page 148, while Carrie's at the prom and Margaret is sitting there thinking about her grandmother and how her grandma had powers like Carrie's, she says that, she found Carrie in her crib levitating her bottle and laughing at the bottle like it was a big game, and she almost killed Carrie at that point, but Ralph had stopped her. So if Ralph died before Carrie was born, I don't see how he could have stopped Margaret from killing Carrie, and Carrie shouldn't have been killed at that time. I don't know, so that one seemed like a big continuity error that I never really paid attention to before. I never really noticed it. And I think that is it. So that was the very first episode of the Stephen King Sematary Club. I thought it went okay. Have a spooky day.